Transport for London have given me his address. Witnesses? None so far.
Rob not with you?
Got a message saying he'll be in later. What have we got here?
Louis Moretti attended Wadmers College, 16. No sign of his phone yet.
Sustained an injury at the back of the head, inconsistent with the fall. First impressions suggest that he was hit, then dragged into the water.
Any idea of time frame?
About an hour ago, tops.
So between 8:30 and 9:30 this morning.
He also has some bruising around his right eye, which is 2 or 3 days old.
I'll speak to the school. Any details for next of kin?
Dad's a solicitor, Mum's a social worker.
A phone would be useful, as would a murder weapon.
Detective Sergeant Hall, and this is Trainee Detective Constable Fitzgerald. Are you Mrs. Moretti?
Yes. What? Is it Louis?
Can I come in?
The school called. He wasn't at registration. Where is he?
Shall we go inside?
It's bad, isn't it? I can tell.
A boy in possession of your son's travel card and school pass has been found.
No. Dad?
He appears to match your son's photo, and from the photos in here, I'm sorry.
No, he's not. He can't be.
Where was he found?
In the park, on the other side of the high road.
That's not on his way to school.
Look, I know this is a lot to take in, but can you think of anyone who might have had a problem with Louis? Or anything that can help us with our inquiry?
Oh, he's such a good lad. He's never in trouble.
With your permission, can my colleague go and look in Louis' room? There was some bruising around your son's right eye that looks a few days old. Do you know how he got it?
five-a-side football on a Monday night. He ran into some kid's elbow.
Louis told you that?
I didn't just make it up.
Of course. How did Louis normally travel to school?
Bus.
Alone? With friends?
Alone, I think. I mean, he may see mates on the way. We didn't really talk about it.
How would you describe your relationship with Louis?
Mine?
Both of you.
What are you getting at?
I'm just trying to build a picture.
You think that I gave him the black eye? Is that what you're saying?
Of course not.
I'm sorry. I need some air.
Control, can officers look out for a red Volvo 4x4 registration number OU10GOP?
Received.
Can I try calling him from your mobile, please?
All received. Thank you.
You killed my son!
Right! That is enough!
You killed my son!
I'm arresting both of you for a fray. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be used in evidence. Do you understand?
Why are the cops here?
No idea.
Form class first, please. Kids who knew him best. Then we'll move on to the rest of the year group.
Yes, of course.
Do you have any idea where your husband's going? Now that it's just the two of us, if there's anything at all you want to tell me about home life or...
Enzo would never lay a finger on anyone, especially Louis.
Is it okay if I just bag up a few bits and pieces to take back to the station?
Whatever you need to do.
Did Louis have a girlfriend?
Not that I knew about.
Did you know anyone called Tara?
No. Don't think so. To be honest, since he's been at secondary, didn't know nearly as much as I used to.
Hello? Your name is?
Owen Telford.
I'm afraid I have some difficult news for you. One of your classmates, Louis Moretti, he's died. He was found this morning. I'm sorry. I know it must be a shock.
He was my best mate.
You okay?
Did he kill himself?
No, he didn't. There must be a reason you think Louis might have killed himself. Owen, if he was having any problems with friends or at home, it's very important that you tell me. Do you understand?
Look, the only reason I said that is because they're always banging on about that sort of stuff here, you know? Mental health, look out for each other or something, I don't know. He seemed all right. Maybe quieter than normal. Same old Louis.
And when did you last see him?
Yesterday, end of school.
Why were you late for school this morning?
Missed my bus.
I've been a defense lawyer for over 20 years. This is a total waste of time. I shouldn't have hit Rodney McCoy, I admit that, but he made some serious threats against me and my family.
What threats?
I defended his brother, Desmond McCoy. Rodney McCoy tried to persuade me to obtain a false statement from an associate of his. I refused. So Desmond gets 11 years. And Rodney turns up at my offices a few days ago telling me that I'm going to be sorry and all that.
So you think that he killed Louis to get revenge?
I don't think I know.
Balin, let him get back to this grieving wife.
Will do. I thought you were going to talk to Rob. This is getting ridiculous.
He's not in a good place.
Well, he's not doing his job.
Yesterday, he was talking about jacking it all in. Louis doesn't seem to be an obvious murder victim. Didn't stand out, kept himself to himself. But bright, on the football team. So it could just be a case of wrong kid in the wrong place.
But he wasn't on his normal route to school.
His mobile still hasn't been found. Cell site and call data have been requested.
We need to see what Rodney McCoy has to say. Chief Superintendent.
David. Actually, I'm here to see you, trainee Detective Constable Fitzgerald. Or should I say, Detective Constable Fitzgerald. You'll be getting an email from us soon. I just wanted to congratulate you in person.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have a moment?
Sir.
Congratulations.
Where is Detective Constable Brady?
He's taken a half-day's leave.
Did I not send you to the pub to clear the air with him?
I did.
If you can't sort out your team, David, I'll have to do it for you.
Officers at the scene witnessed you punching Mr. Moretti in the face.
Yeah, well, he turned up on my doorstep and started having a go at me. What was I meant to do?
Why would Mr. Moretti want to attack you?
No idea.
Have you ever been to Mr. Moretti's office?
Yeah, once. With my brother. And he got in a bit of trouble.
Just that time?
Yeah. Why?
Can you tell me where you were this morning?
Was it all?
Is there anyone who can corroborate that?
Mrs. in Milton Keynes. Visiting her sister.
So Billy's checking on Rodney McCoy's visits to Enzo Moretti's office. Why haven't you been picking up?
Switched my phone off. I'm using the pay-as-you-go.
What's going on?
Yesterday, on the way to the lab, I was robbed.
What was taken?
The smashed up mobile from the Harry Stedman murder investigation. There was a guy in a hoodie. He shoved his phone in my face and he had a video on there that was shot in the twins' bedroom. The threat couldn't have been clearer.
Where are Cherry and the kids now?
Safe.
Why didn't you call us? This needs reporting.
No offense, boss. I don't trust anyone in this building right now. But how did this guy know that I was taking that mobile back to the lab? What?
We suspect that Tyler Bates, Grace Harper, and Harry Stedman were all killed by the same person. We further suspect that person is a serving police officer.
Well, seriously?
Whatever was on that phone must incriminate him. The guy that took the phone from you, what did he look like?
Male, IC1, 5'10", 11, medium build, beard, dark glasses, a hoodie, London accent. Oh.
That doesn't sound anything like your target.
No, but he tipped off this one who came after Rob, believe me.
Your target?
You don't need to know.
So what happens now?
I want you to give me a statement so I could generate a covert investigation into the robbery. And I want you to act like everything's normal.
I know that I'm sure that my family's safe. I just want to go back to my job.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. We've got the unexplained death of a schoolboy. If you could chase up where we're at with forensics and local inquiries.
Okay.
And Rob, we'll catch this guy. I promise you. Well, we both know who tipped the killer off about Rob having that phone.
You think you know. You haven't got a shred of proof.
Enzo Moretti's colleagues confirmed Rodney McCoy did make threats at the office 2 days ago.
So McCoy lied then?
Go and arrest him for the murder. Leave him to stew on it in the cells. Then break his stayed-at-home alibi.
Yeah. I also spoke to the football coach. Louis didn't sustain any injuries at training.
So either Louis lied to his father, or his father lied to us.
Sockos have found the murder weapon. Looks like Louis was hit over the head with a brick, then pushed into the water.
Anything else?
The service providers got back to us over the victim's phone. There was a call made to Louis' phone at 8:23 this morning from a pay-as-you-go that's currently switched off. I've applied for cell site and call data.
Probably the last person to speak to Louis. It's been confirmed that your son drowned, but his death was not an accident or a suicide. It's now officially a murder investigation. My team will be in contact. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Those calls, they never get any easier.
The face-to-face, where I tell them their son would have survived the head injury if he hadn't gone into the water, is going to be even harder.
I see Detective Constable Brady is in.
That's right.
How is he?
Actually, there was an incident last night. He was robbed of evidence outside the forensics lab.
What was taken?
The phone Rob found at the house where Harry Steadman was murdered. The guy threatened Rob's kids.
Right. He and his family need police protection. I'll get somebody onto it.
He's got it under control. When it comes to Rob's family, he likes to take care of things himself.
Fair enough. Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Thank you, sir.
Cell site analysis on Rodney McCoy's phone pinpoints him miles away from his home at 8:40. It triangulates to arrived lockups. And got his keys from custody. Shall we?
How's your family doing?
They're upset. Kids don't understand why they've had to move. Why they can't see me.
It's difficult. Oh, Rob.
Looks like Rodney's been a naughty boy.
We've just found the proceeds of a hijacked lorry in your lockup, Mr. McCoy.
Not my lockup.
Why then do you have a key to it? You said you were home earlier, but your mobile suggested you were at these garages on Hallam Street at the time of the murder that we're investigating. Did you give your phone to someone else?
Okay. Well, if I coughed to all that gear on Hallam Street, you better believe me when I say I didn't touch this Moretti kid.
Why should we?
I was hardly going to tell you where I was this morning, was I? I'm not stupid. I'm not.
We also have witness statements saying that you made serious threats to Mr. Moretti at his offices. That's two of your comments we've disproved so far.
All right. Well, I did meet his lad once. I went round to the gaff on Monday. I was going to have it out with Moretti. I'd had a few jars. Anyway, when I turned up, Moretti weren't there. But his son was outside and he was getting a right pummeling off some other lad.
Louis was being beaten up.
If that's his name, then yeah.
Could you describe this other boy?
He was black. Same age, same school uniform.
Do you know what they were fighting about?
It seemed to be over some girl who killed herself or something.
Certainly makes more sense of Owen Telford's comment about suicide earlier.
Owen Telford's gone AWOL. Not at school, not at home. School says he's got 60% attendance, frequent truant, and in and out of trouble with the staff there.
I found a book of songs Louis Moretti was writing in his room. One of them mentioned a girl called Tara. I did some digging. 4 days ago, a Tara Hallwood died by suicide. Post-mortem toxicology pointed towards an overdose.
Where was she found?
In the bedroom at her foster home. I've got details for her foster parents and for her birth mother, Nessa Hallwood.
Rob, take a closer look at Tara's care history, will you? And Billy and I will track down the mother. Rob?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Thank you for coming, Miss Harwood.
Nessa.
Nessa. We're investigating the murder of Louis Moretti.
Never heard of him.
Where were you this morning?
I had a supervised visit with my daughter, Leah.
And where was that?
With a foster family near Shadwell. They're never going to let her back with me. And my other girl's dead. I don't even have enough money to bury her properly.
You mean Tara? Are you sure Tara never mentioned a boy called Louis Moretti?
She was taken off me. I hardly ever got to see her. They said she would be better off without me. And then I lost her altogether.
Tara Horwood was in and out of foster care. A senior caseworker in the most recent proceedings where she and her baby sister were removed from her mother's care was Josie Moretti.
Louis' mother?
Apparently, Josie denied knowing anyone called Tara when Billy questioned her.
And why would she lie? Speak to the Morettis.
When we took the kids away from Nessa, it was easy finding somewhere for Leah the baby to stay. But I couldn't find anywhere for Tara that late at night. She looked so scared, so vulnerable. I know I shouldn't have brought her back to ours, but, well, I did. Just for one night.
So you didn't know she was staying over?
I was away with work. I wish I hadn't been. I could have talked some sense into her.
Tara stayed the night. Then what?
The next day, I found her somewhere to live. What I didn't realize was Tara and Louis had really hit it off. And a month or so later, I found they were seeing each other. You know, in a relationship.
To think I've been blaming myself.
Please. Anyway, a few days back, Louis told me she'd dumped him. I wasn't very sympathetic to his... He was heartbroken.
It would have been helpful if you hadn't lied to us earlier.
I didn't want to admit.
To being stupid, Mr. Moretti.
No, he's right. I am stupid. I didn't want to lose my job.
Three images of Tara Horwood naked were picked up by Louis' service provider. Those same images also appeared on deleted posts on 2 of Louis' social media accounts, with some pretty ferocious body-shaming comments.
Body-shaming? Well, that's not the Louis we thought we were dealing with. Well, it would explain why she finished with him and then killed herself.
But who would be angry enough with Louis to want to kill him?
Well, maybe Louis' friend Owen Telford? I mean, maybe he had a thing for her and was defending her honor. Is there still no sign of him?
Off the grid and his mobile isn't on.
All right. Yeah, they've come through. See what his parents have to say. All right, cheers. These messages were posted by Louis 5 days ago, but with images attached. They were then deleted the following day.
No. No, he wouldn't do that. Stop it. He wouldn't, would he?
I don't know what I know anymore.
How can you say that? We are talking about Louis, our son. There's no way he would do that. He liked her. Wrote songs about her.
She's right. There's absolutely no way Louis would do anything like that.
Is there any chance anyone else could have had access to Louis' phone on Sunday?
Remember, you and Louis visited your sisters.
Louis forgot his phone, kept moaning about it.
And Owen came round here for Louis, and I said he could wait in his room for him to come back.
So Owen had time?
Plenty of time.
I was annoyed with Louis. I couldn't believe how grumpy he was being about not having his phone. It was Owen. It must have been.
Louis' parents are 100% convinced that he wasn't with his phone at the time the body-shaming post was sent. Owen Telford was.
The phone that called Louis at 8:23 this morning has just come live.
Right. Circulate Owen Telford to local units and council CCTV and then head to where the phone is being used.
Right.
Nessa Hallwood, stop! Police! Stay there! Don't move.
Nessa Hallwood, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Louis Moretti. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
My daughter's just died. What is wrong with you?
Nessa Hallwood and her dealer are being processed.
Cheers.
Is it normal what the chief superintendent did? Telling me I've been promoted like that?
It's good. Don't look so worried. You deserve it.
What do you think of the chief super?
I hardly know the man.
Detective Sergeant, what can I do for you?
I hear the detective inspectors filled you in about Detective Constable Brady being robbed last night.
He did, yes. Any progress?
But it's early days, but the concerning thing is that the suspect clearly had been in Rob's home. He had video in his girls' bedrooms.
So he knew where Rob lived?
This is awkward. I was checking the HR system and I noticed that you accessed Rob's records yesterday.
Well, yes. I mean, as you know, I had concerns about DC Brady's behavior, and so I accessed his records. Am I being accused of something here?
Of course not. I'm just covering all the bases. Thank you for your time, sir.
We'll take it from here, thanks. Owen Telford's mum has just dropped him downstairs. Apparently, he has a confession to make.
I told my mum what I did.
she went nuts. Said if I didn't own up, I'd end up in more trouble.
Own up to what? Owen, what did you tell your mum?
I'm only telling you this so that you don't try and pin everything else on me, yeah?
Yeah.
Tara. Louis was seeing her. He was obsessed. Don't see why. She was a right skank. Yeah, rough as anything. Just trying to look out for him. That's what mates do.
Yeah, get to the point.
Found some gross photos of her on his phone. Posted them to his page, and I said what everyone was thinking. Yeah, I did him a favor. It's just a laugh, really.
You posted naked pictures from Louis' phone just for a laugh. Photos and body-shaming comments that ultimately led to a young girl killing herself.
She might have been planning on doing that anyway.
Did Louis find out?
Yeah.
How did he react?
He went for me. Look, it was a joke, yeah? Don't know what a joke is? Stop looking at me like that. It's not like I actually killed anyone.
We now know that you turned up for your supervised visit with your other daughter at 8:15 this morning, but you were turned away for being intoxicated.
No comment.
I refer to Exhibit BF12. This is the phone that I took from your possession on arrest. Does it belong to you?
No.
A number of text messages sent to this phone have the name Nessa in their greeting. How do you explain that?
It must belong to another Nessa.
So, a phone in your possession, Nessa Horwood, belongs to someone else called Nessa?
Okay, yeah, it's my phone.
Why did you just lie? A call came from this phone to Louis Moretti at 8:23 a.m. this morning. Can you explain that?
No comment.
If you have an innocent explanation, I would like to hear it.
Tara used my phone a few weeks back to call Louis. Hers was out of juice or something. She was so happy. Happiest I'd ever seen her. Said she really loved him. Anyway, his number was still on my phone from when she made that call. I just wanted to talk to him, face to face, to ask him why he did what he did.
Which was?
Louis Moretti was the reason Tara killed herself. His horrible, dirty pictures and all the nasty stuff he said about her.
So, you wanted to speak to Louis in person? Did you?
I met him in the park. I wanted him to see what he'd done to me, to apologise. But he just started saying it wasn't him, that it was his friend. Well, that's all that happened.
Nessa, your flat has been searched. Clothing and footwear with bloodstains were found. That blood is a match for Louis Moretti.
I was so angry. He started walking away from me and I picked up a brick or a rock or something
and I hit him.
And then what did you do?
I panicked. I dragged him to the side of the water. And I pushed him in.
We've got evidence to prove that Louis Moretti didn't post the images of Tara on social media. One of his friends did. Apparently, Louis really liked your daughter. I have to tell you, Nessa, you went after the wrong boy.
So, Owen, your joke, or helping out a mate, or whatever you want to call it, resulted in 2 deaths.
Sorry, what?
Well, it turns out that it's thanks to you that Louis Moretti was killed. You still think that's funny? At last. Something that's made you shut up and think. It's a pity Louis Moretti had to die for that to happen. On Telford, I'm arresting you for distributing indecent images. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
Do you really think the guy who threatened my kids is a serving police officer?
I'm sure of it.
Night. Night, sir.
Congratulations, by the way, Detective Constable.
Thank you. You heading home?
I've got a few things to sort out, but I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Bye.
Detective Constable, I heard what happened last night. I understand you want to protect your family yourself. I respect that. But I want you to know that if you change your mind, we're here for you.
Thanks, sir. He's all right, once you get to know him.
You think so? Chief Superintendent Mulgrew was the one that tipped off the killer about you having that phone.
What?
And passed on your address.
You've changed your tune?
Well, I checked to see if anyone had accessed Rob's HR details, and Mulgrew had. I spoke to him. I asked him why, and I looked him in the eye when he said it was for Rob's welfare. He was lying.
So you now accept he's involved in these murders?
I do.
And you're going to help us bring these people to justice?
I am.
Well, how can you be so sure that Chief Super was lying?
Vivian knows Mr. Mulgrew very well.
Years ago, and I mean years ago, me and Chief Superintendent Mulgrew...
What?
We were together.
Together?
We were married.
there's a murder, it's the job of detectives to find out who the killer is and how they killed. And often, it's forensic evidence which provides the clues.
Each bit of information delivers that to the whole jigsaw.
I was able to test that sample and I got a DNA profile.
There's no doubt at all that forensics were absolutely crucial in this case.
In this series, we shine a light on how cutting-edge forensic techniques and the power of science were able to bring some of our most dangerous and despicable killers to justice.
This was such an unnatural crime.
It's not a question of if he will kill again, it's a question of when.
He believed that he was invincible and that nothing could stop him.
We'll hear how some of the toughest and most disturbing crimes were solved thanks to the tiniest fragments of evidence.
When you begin a forensic investigation, you don't know what you're going to find.
The officer plunged his hand into loose soil and actually felt cold flesh.
From the type of insects that were around, she'd been dead for at least 5 years.
And how even the most forensically aware of killers couldn't beat the experts and hide their crimes.
You know, if he comes out, heaven help somebody. Because he is a dangerous, dangerous man.
In this episode, a missing couple raises alarm bells.
They'd just gone off the map. It wasn't right. It wasn't right at all.
Bizarre twists that turn the investigation on its head.
It was all baloney. There wasn't a shred of truth in it.
And the science that could crack the case.
The amount of blood that I saw led me to believe that somebody had been seriously injured there.
This is Forensics, Catching the Killer. One of the largest reservoirs in England, Rutland Water covers an area of over 11.5 square kilometres of the country's smallest county. Created in 1976, it's been a haven for wildlife, as well as people seeking peace and tranquility from nearby Leicester and Peterborough ever since.
In the day, it's an extremely busy place. It's popular with the dog walkers, fishermen, cyclists, plenty of cyclists around. But then at night, you wouldn't expect to see anything. The car parks are all closed off. So to see any movement in here or around here at night is quite unusual, really.
Back in 1993, Richard Hallam was a daily visitor to the reservoir.
I was 21 at the time, and I was working at a local country club. Part of my job was to work on the night shift so that we could reassemble rooms overnight, change projectors, cameras, that kind of stuff for delegates the next day. Also on the night shift, there's a security guy that would work with us as well. And occasionally we would swap duties, help each other out. He did some of my work, I did some of his work. And the particular night in question, I said to the guy, do you want me to do your patrol? He said, yeah, do my patrol. So part of the job was to walk around the site, check in at various points around the country club, one of which was the gatehouse. It must have been 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Walking back to the country club from the gatehouse, I looked over the water and I could see a car going down the track that you can see over there. Side lights on, not main headlights, just the side lights, but making its way down this track that you can see through the trees over there, making its way along to what we know as Armley Woods, which is just over there. I thought it was odd, but other than that, never really twigged. Just carried on with the patrol. At that time, of course, there was no inquiry, there was nobody missing or anything like that. So it was just one of those things, It is the first time that I've been back to this spot since that November in '93, and strange and quite chilling feeling, really,
With a population of less than 800,000, Rutland is hardly a crime hotspot, and it's one of the quieter beats for Leicestershire Constabulary, which police the county.
Rutland itself, it was a very rural area, beautiful countryside, and of course we'd got the reservoir, which was a massive tourist attraction. So you were getting people there from all different walks of society.
Back in 1993, former Detective Chief Superintendent Steve Johnson was the area commander in Rutland.
You could sort of count the number of crimes that they'd have there on your hand. And if there was a crime, everybody knew about it, and everybody seemed to know what everybody else was doing. It was a very sort of insular sort of existence there for people. There were quite a lot of retired people who obviously came there to see out their years because it was such a quiet, beautiful place to live.
Two of those retired people were 68-year-old Derek and 69-year-old Eileen Severs, who'd moved to the area from York several years earlier.
The Severs family were very well known. Derek and Eileen lived quite an affluent lifestyle. They'd settled into the community in Rutland, and Derek liked to pint at his local pub, the Finches, and he went everywhere in his Blue Rover because he had mobility problems. He'd retired but still did little bits of work here and there. Mrs. Severs was very active. She was involved in all the charitable groups locally, and her involvement even led to her being awarded an MBE for helping prisoners at the local prison, HMP Ashwell.
Well known, well liked and well meaning, the Severs had a busy social life. But in November 1993, this active couple unexpectedly dropped off the Rutland Water radar.
The first people to start raising alarms were friends and people from different clubs and societies that the Severs family belonged to. They were involved in lots of community activities and fundraising for charities, etc. And because of that, they were creatures of habit. They were very punctual when they went to places. And on this occasion, I do believe that Mrs. Severs had made arrangements to deliver raffle prizes from a fundraising event, and she hadn't turned up.
They went missing on Saturday, and by Thursday, the 18th of November, people were worried and anxious about where they were.
With concerns raised, police initially treated Derek and Eileen's case as a missing persons inquiry.
When people went missing, there were set procedures, really. An officer would visit and make an initial assessment, and invariably people were found very quickly. So they never sort of progressed to the next stage, which would have been a more intensive checking up on all of their friends. Really, it was doing all the nuts and bolts to try and establish whether they'd gone voluntarily or whether there was something more suspicious that was going on.
As they took initial statements from worried friends of Derek and Eileen, they questioned them to establish a timeline for their last known movements.
The last sighting of Mrs. Severs was at a charity bazaar in Oakham at 1:30 p.m. on the 13th of November. The last sighting of Mr. Severs was that he'd had a pint in his local pub, the Finches, on the same day.
Most missing people are found safe and well within the first 24 hours. But 5 days had passed since anyone had seen or heard from Eileen and Derek. With concerns mounting, officers drove to their home for a closer look. When they arrived, somebody answered the door. In November 1993, the tight-knit community living around picturesque Rutland Water was growing concerned about the whereabouts of two popular residents, Derek and Eileen Severs.
The picture that evolved was again strengthening the case for a full investigation, because never in all the years that they'd lived there and all the people they knew had they just gone off the map.
When officers arrived at Derek and Eileen's home, the door was opened by their son, 37-year-old Roger Severs.
Roger was somebody I knew back in '93 from the Lamici wine bar. Particularly when I was back home from university, I used to go down there for a beer or two a couple of times a week, and I knew people there, and we would chat about golf and music or whatever the issue was of the day.
To the young Nick Beggy, Roger cut a respectable figure.
He was well dressed. I can picture in my head now with his chinos, trousers, and blazer, and open neck shirt. And he told us he was a grain buyer for Weetabix, and I can remember that very, very clearly.
Like his parents, Roger came across as a likeable and sociable character, and there was nothing to suggest that what he told the police at his parents' home was anything but true.
Roger said, oh, they've gone away for a week. He said that he dropped them off at Peterborough Station and they'd taken a train south. And the last that he'd heard was a phone call from his mum on the 16th of November, which was 2 days before the officers visited.
2 days off the map is better than 5 days. But despite reassurances from Roger, police remain concerned about where Derek and Eileen might be and continued their missing persons investigation.
One of the neighbours told them that if they went away, they always came round and said, look after the house, do this, do that. They hadn't done that. But the police did an extensive investigation as to where they might have disappeared. So they went down to Peterborough, which is where they would have caught the train from, to go down to London, and they made inquiries there. Nobody had seen them, and they went to King's Cross just to double check, which is the destination station, and there was nothing there either. Absolutely no sign of them.
At that time, there was no CCTV on the platforms in the stations. We didn't even have mobile phones. That made it a more difficult inquiry because everything had to be done the hard way. There was no technology, really, to assist.
While investigators made inquiries at hotels in the area they left for, they continued to speak to close friends of Derek and Eileen.
All of their friends looked mystified that they can't have gone on holiday because she's supposed to be delivering the raffle prizes. He's supposed to be coming down the pub. Because if they were going on holiday, they would have told everybody.
The friends didn't just have lots to say about Derek and Eileen going on holiday. They also had lots to say about their son, Roger. He too was well known in the community.
Roger went on dates with people he met through the Lonely Hearts column, and he'd spin a real load of lies to them, pretending to be a big shot. The truth is, he had a few menial jobs and hadn't even held on to them for very long. So he came out with elaborate stories of successes for big companies, business deals, claimed to have a flash motor, but it was always in the garage being fixed. He masqueraded as a high-flying businessman who just clinched a good deal. He'll tell everyone, I'm celebrating this success. And it was all baloney. There wasn't a shred of truth in it.
It was becoming pretty obvious that there was a certain level of disappointment from the family with their son, Roger. He'd had a good education. I think he went to public school, and they expected more. His father had always been a high flyer.
He had never kept a job for more than a month or two normally. He was considered to be a huge disappointment to his parents, who'd been very, very successful in their own lives. And Roger turned out to be a layabout, lazy, didn't do whatever they wanted. And so they had stopped giving him money because they were fed up of giving him money because it was just going down the drain.
But there was more than just unmet expectations that was causing tension between Roger and his parents. There was also a recent fallout about finances.
Roger kept sponging off his parents, and in the end they got fed up. He wanted quite a lot of money for his latest business venture, and they said, stop, that's enough. We've paid all your debts. You've never actually succeeded in anything. We don't want to lose any more money on a wasted venture, so you're not having it.
Rumours also swirled that Derek and Eileen wanted to cut Roger from their will in favour of their grandson. Could this be a motive to murder? Roger's possible motive now made him a person of interest in his parents' disappearance. Officers paid him another visit at Derek and Eileen's home. This time, they asked to come inside for a closer look.
A detective sergeant asked for permission to search the house, and the house was untidy. These were people who had a spotlessly clean house. Everything had a place, everything had a home in the house, and it was untidy, and more alarm bells started to sound. The sergeant and the constable who went with him noticed that the bathroom carpet and the kitchen carpet were both missing.
When officers questioned Roger about the carpet, he claimed his dad had dropped a chip pan, and that's why that section of carpet was missing. And again, the bathroom was the result of a spill, and he just passed it off as just being normal.
Roger's story was suspicious, but with no evidence linking him to his parents' disappearance, there was little the officers could do. Elsewhere, though, detectives had made a breakthrough. A police report, totally unconnected to the case, had been discovered and offered vital new clues.
On Monday, November the 15th, about 6:30, two officers were on their way to a call when they noticed Derek Severs' Blue Rover, which seemed out of place, and someone near it acting suspiciously. They stopped and asked him what he was doing. He said he was answering a call of nature, but they noticed there were some fertiliser bags nearby. And when questioned about those, he said he was looking for leaves to collect for leaf mould.
That person was Roger Severs. Steve and his team wasted no time rushing to the area where Roger had been seen acting suspiciously in Derek's car, hoping for a break in the case. A search of the site revealed no hard evidence. But where else had Roger been in Derek's distinctive car that day? Again, police reports held more clues, this time from a traffic officer's logbook.
Traffic officers had a nose, as good a nose as detectives for seeing things that were out of place. And this log told us that they'd seen this car at a rubbish tip and that they'd seen Roger Severs with it. And it gave them an explanation which was believable, that he was just dropping stuff off it. But they made a record of it. And because of that, the officers submitted this record. We had to then send a search team, and we sent our tactical unit to actually search this tip.
A meticulous forensic search began at the tip, looking for evidence that could connect Roger with the disappearance of his parents.
They were there for several days, going through every single bag and every article on this tip, and a really dirty job. And they did turn up some things. There was a blood-stained towel. Could be anybody's, couldn't be tied in.
Another blank. Now, a week into the investigation, Steve and his team were no closer to tracking down Derek and Eileen Severs. And with every passing day, the chances of finding them safe and well diminished. In November 1993, the small community of Rutland Water were growing increasingly concerned for Derek and Eileen Severs, a married couple who had now been missing for a week. The Severs' son, Roger, had told police his parents were away visiting London, a story detectives weren't convinced by when they'd spoken to him at his parents' home.
Everybody who went to the house said, although we'd got nothing, there was always this feeling, it was a general feeling, that it just wasn't right. The detectives were aware that there were carpets missing in the bathroom and in the kitchen, and the excuses that had been given by the son for their absence were a little bit thin. They didn't seem to really fit.
Investigators were now becoming increasingly worried that Derek and Eileen had come to harm.
Everything pointed to the fact that there'd been foul play, because it was sort of a week on from the last contact with anybody, and that was another major concern. If it had been a day, 2 days, you can deal with that. A week, you know that you're not going to find them alive, and that is always heart-wrenching, really, because a missing person inquiry is now a murder inquiry.
And the man Leicestershire police believed could be responsible for the disappearance of Derek and Eileen was their son, Roger. But they still didn't have any hard evidence to prove that Roger had killed his parents.
Even though the evidence wasn't conclusive, it was all circumstantial. It was all pointing in the direction that the parents had been killed. He was the prime suspect.
Steve and his team had to take a huge gamble, which could risk blowing any case against Roger.
And because we got no bodies, but also because of the fact that there was always a chance that Roger might try and leave the country. He was arrested on suspicion of murder, which again was something that was unusual. That if we'd let him go, who knows where he'd have ended up, whether we'd have managed to get him back. It was a really odd case.
Steve's decision to formally arrest Roger did provide investigators with an opportunity to strengthen the case against him.
To move things on, we really needed to get into that house and to do a proper forensic search of the property. And the only way we could achieve that, because he wasn't consenting to that sort of search, was to actually arrest him on suspicion of the murder. And that would in turn give us the opportunity to get into the house and do a proper forensic search of the property.
Steve had rolled the dice and now relied on his forensic team to find the evidence that could link Roger to the suspected murder of Derek and Eileen.
My role in Leicestershire Constabulary at the time was the crime scene manager. So effectively, if there's any serious crime, then I would be called in to manage all the sort of various angles that needed to be done. Normally I would get called in when there was a body or some very serious offence had taken place, but this was a little bit unusual because it was very much a case of, well, we don't quite know what's happened. We had a set of circumstances, and obviously we wanted to get more information as to what we thought could have actually happened. It didn't look right because they'd been missing for a while, but we had an open mind about the whole thing. As a crime scene investigator, one is always looking out for any evidence that might give more credence to one story or another story.
The crime scene search was soon uncovering interesting and unusual documents that reinforced investigators' suspicions about Roger.
The police found an important piece of evidence during the search, and it was Roger's 14-point to-do list. Wheelbarrow, clean. Rubbish. Mum's car, clean. Dad's car, clean. Clean bathroom. Check shed. Pictures. Fire, check it's out. Deliver other prize. Check hotels. Ashes. Cut down shrubs. Point 13, little garage. And point 14, dump.
Were these mundane household chores to tick off, or a murderer's to-do list? And could Roger's clean-up plans mean forensic evidence had been wiped away? Undeterred, Orlando and his team first examined the bathroom, where some missing carpet had aroused suspicions on the officer's first search.
it was fairly obvious that this bathroom was not as it should be, inasmuch as all the carpets had been stripped and it was down to the bare wood. Having established there was something odd going on there, we then investigate the rest of the house in a similar sort of manner, going through each room and looking at it almost on hands and knees to see if there's any evidence of anything else that looks untoward.
While Orlando and other members of his team scoured through the rest of the property, on-call scientist Peter Lamb arrived on scene to inspect the bathroom in closer detail.
I began to examine the bathroom and toilet, and I noticed that there were one or two tiny specks of blood, but not in the usual place that you find blood in people's homes. You would normally expect to find blood on the carpets or the flooring, maybe on the tops of the sink, where if you cut yourself shaving, you might drip a piece of blood and then forget to wipe it up. But in this case, there was nothing like that. The fact that these were tiny pieces of blood was unusual, because if you cut yourself shaving and a drip forms and drips off, in forensic terms, that is a lot of blood. The tiny specks of blood which I was finding normally indicate some sort of blunt force injury. Now, we use a chemical enhancement technique, and on a lot of surfaces where I couldn't see any blood whatsoever, I was getting a very weak positive reaction, which tends to suggest that there was blood there to start with, but somebody has made an attempt to clean it off.
The blood spatter is something, but the attempt to clean the blood is worrying. As they suspected, the killer had clearly taken time to destroy any forensic evidence. But, as Peter quickly discovered, they hadn't covered up all of their tracks.
And I decided, strangely enough, to lay on the floor and look up. When I lay on the floor and looked up, I could see blood staining underneath the toilet, underneath the sink, and on the return edges of the bath fascia panel. They were the type of blood staining that you would expect if blood had run down these areas, pooled underneath and started to drip from those areas. The faces that you could see from standing up or sitting down, they'd all been cleaned. But the underneaths, where you wouldn't see if you were in those positions, hadn't been cleaned at all. This tended to suggest that originally there was quite a lot of blood had been shed. The amount of blood that I saw led me to believe that somebody had been seriously injured there. The amount of blood that potentially was there that had been cleaned up was a life-threatening amount of blood, I would suggest.
Finally, police had forensic evidence to suggest an attack had taken place in the bathroom. But obviously, there was no body at the scene, meaning it must have been moved, crucially leaving a forensic trail in blood.
I searched the flooring between there and the exits, and although there was no visible blood along that route, I used the chemical enhancement technique and found traces of blood which were invisible to the eye along most of the route between the bathroom, through the hallway, through the kitchen, and then into the garage, which was attached to the house.
The trail of blood wasn't the only forensic clue that Peter uncovered.
But whilst I was looking at that, I also found some fibres, a yellowy green looking fibre, tiny, barely visible to the naked eye, but they had the appearance of rolled up hay bales that you see in fields. You know, the finding of fibres in itself is probably not unusual, but the appearance of these was particularly unusual in this instance. That, together with not being able to find any blood from somebody who was clearly bleeding heavily, led me to believe that maybe the person had been wrapped in something and dragged through the house. the scenes of crime officers had finished their work, pulled the garage door down, and they'd noticed that there was some blood staining on the outside of the garage door. So I had looked at it, tested it, it was certainly blood. And the distribution of it was such that, again, in my view, somebody had been beaten repeatedly. So there'd been blows into wet blood, which had caused the blood to spatter, and some of it had landed on the garage door. That could have only happened when the garage door was closed, not when it was open. That led to the decision that either two people had been injured in separate areas, or the person who'd been injured in the bathroom had been able to get up and then had been further assaulted outside. And it wasn't until we'd done some preliminary blood typing that we were able to say that it was two people who were involved in this. One person had been assaulted outside near the garage door, and another person had been assaulted inside the house in the bathroom.
Forensic investigators had now found significant evidence to suggest this was definitely a murder inquiry, not a missing persons search. But the question still remained. Where were Derek and Eileen, and what had happened to them? Police in England's smallest county had been investigating the disappearance of a retired couple, Derek and Eileen Severs, for 2 weeks. Forensic evidence suggested they had been murdered in their home in rural Rutland Water. The prime suspect, their 37-year-old son, Roger. However, there was still one important part of the case against him that was missing. Police had still not found their bodies.
Rutland was a massive area. It's often easier to search a more residential area than it is a rural area. We just got masses of open fields and water. I mean, we got the lake there. Who was to say that they hadn't gone out in a boat and waited and dumped into the reservoir? It was, it really was, wet your finger and stick it in the air, and where do we start?
The starting point turned out to be not far from the Severs' home, their back garden.
Mr. Severs was a very keen gardener, and when they were searching the house, they found in the garden that there were traces where soil had been removed, which again seemed unusual. Not frighteningly unusual, but unusual that there was quite an amount of soil that was missing.
Had the soil been removed to create a shallow grave? Officers dug into the soil, expecting to find the bodies of the Severs. But the garden wasn't a graveyard after all. Officers might have been frustrated by their search of the garden, but the garage was about to yield more answers. Notably, Derek's pride and joy, his blue Rover.
What seemed odd to me at the time was that it looked a little bit muddy, a little bit grubby, but when we looked into the window onto the dashboard, we could see that there was a whole series of cleaning tokens. And this family were really scrupulously clean. So this seemed really quite odd to me. It seemed very, very strange that you got all these cleaning tokens and yet the car was muddy and grubby. This is something that piqued my interest, sort of thinking, this isn't quite right. This doesn't fit the theory I have of the people that lived here and how they lived. So it became quite a focal point quite quickly as to what's happening here. So obviously this looks interesting, more interesting than if it was just any old car. We then examined it and there were traces of mud on the inside smeared, and there was also positive blood stains as well in the boot. The hypothesis was that perhaps this car had been used to remove the bodies from the house.
The forensic search of the crime scene suggested that both Derek and Eileen were now dead. But where were their bodies? In a bid to find their location, detectives needed to turn up the heat on Roger, now being questioned in police custody.
Two of our best interviewers, they had a really good go at him over a long period of time, and he just wasn't budging. He was sticking to the same old story, and a decision had still got to be made, because you either let him go or you charge him, because things were starting to stack up against him. So he was charged without a confession, without a body.
And without that confession, investigators had to go back to the drawing board. Based on the evidence they did have, crime scene manager Orlando Elmhurst had an idea to narrow down the search area. Once again, Derek's car would provide the clues.
The wheel arches, in particular, were caked in mud, and I thought that could potentially hold some information that we could progress with. I thought, right, well, let's contact the archaeology department. I phoned them up and sort of said, look, is there anything or anyone there who could do anything with mud? Because obviously we have the situation of these missing people and we are desperate to find them. And after a few phone calls, I ended up talking to Dr. Tony Brown, who said that he thought he could do something with it.
Could this mud lead detectives to the murdered couple?
It was about 2 weeks later that Tony Brown got back in contact with us, and he sort of constructed a environmental profile from the contents of the soil on the wheel arches. That the scene would be a road verge or parking place by water, as used by fishermen, in or adjacent to woodland with a significant proportion of oak, horse chestnut, ash and lime. The wood edge also borders onto arable fields and pastures, and located on or adjacent to soils derived from Lincolnshire limestone. So he's giving us a very good particular environmental picture of where we should be looking. He had some places in mind that he thought could be viable and would fit that description, and he would then try and narrow that number down to see if he could pinpoint where it could have come from. He ultimately pinpointed 3 potential sites. Exton Wood, and there's Hamilton Wood, and there was Armley Wood. We could then hone our search area, and within 2 days, they'd struck lucky.
I believe that the officer actually felt the earth moving under his feet, and then plunged his hand into loose soil and actually felt cold flesh.
3 weeks after they were last seen, investigators had found Derek and Eileen Severs.
When you find bodies, there's mixed feelings really. One is sadness, obviously, because we knew in our heart of hearts that they were dead. So finding them, it confirmed that. So there is a sadness, but at the same time, there's an elation as well, because you know that you've got the right person. Everything that's been done by everybody working together has led you to this conclusion.
But it wasn't just the bodies of Derek and Eileen that investigators had found. Other pieces of the puzzle also fell into place.
When they found the bodies, they were able to compare the soil in the garden with the soil at the scene and actually say 100% that this came from the Severs garden.
It would seem a reasonable assumption to suggest that some of that soil had been taken away. Again, perhaps it was too difficult to dig a deep enough hole to put the 2 bodies in, together with a blanket and other things. And so soil was taken from the property and used to fill over like that.
And the soil wasn't the only forensic match found in this shallow grave by the water's edge.
The bodies were wrapped in yellowy green blankets, and these blankets' fibres matched little bits of piles that we'd seen in the hallway.
It would also explain why there wasn't a lot of blood on the carpets and on the flooring, because the majority of it would have been absorbed by, as we know it now, a blanket, a thick blanket.
News of the shocking discovery soon rippled across Rutland and was particularly significant for Richard Hallam, who had spotted a strange car just weeks prior.
When I realised that the bodies had been found over in the woods, and I then put the two and two together, it was just an absolute, my God, something that I thought was a little bit strange at the time, to all of a sudden realising, my goodness me, it could have been Roger with his parents in the car. It arouses all sorts of emotions,
Even after the bodies were found, for many, the discovery only led to more questions.
I just wonder what went through their minds when they thought they were going to die at the hands of their own son, their own flesh and blood. This was such an unnatural crime. We're programmed to care for our parents in dotage, and he took the lives from the people who gave him his own life. Their kindness and their love over many years, the support, the money that they poured into his useless business ventures, and how does he repay them? He murders them in cold blood so he can have their luxury lifestyle for himself.
A year later, the case went to trial at Nottingham Crown Court. Based on all of the forensic evidence, prosecutors put forward what they believed happened on the 13th of November, 1993.
During an argument with his mother in the house, he took a steak mallet and repeatedly beat her about the head. Derek drove home, and we know that he was ambushed by his son. Roger Severs brutally bludgeoned his father to death in the garage of the home and left him to die.
The overwhelming forensic evidence was enough to convince the jury that Roger Severs was guilty. He was given 2 life sentences in December 1994.
When you've got so little to go on, it was really the science that actually took us there, and that's the amazing thing about science. It moves on, doesn't it?
The use of forensic science, and particularly using it in this novel way, really moved on that inquiry quite significantly. It is possible that the bodies would not have been discovered for ages, in which case all the other evidence which could have pointed to a particular killer would have disappeared.
Whenever there's a murder, it's the job of detectives to find out who the killer is and how they killed. And often it's forensic evidence which provides the clues.
The finding of his DNA wasn't just on the murder weapon, it was on a most important part of the murder weapon.
This evidence was the breakthrough that we needed.
The forensic evidence in this case was crucial.
In this series, we shine a light on how cutting-edge forensic techniques and the power of science brought the most dangerous killers to justice.
A truly horrific criminal, a monster. It's a hammer blow. You don't know how you're going to carry on.
We'll hear how some of the most disturbing crimes were solved, thanks to the tiniest fragments of evidence.
He basically said to me, she's in the house, go and find her.
The amount of blood that was there indicated that there was a frenzied attack.
There was no reasonable explanation for them. That's why he changed his plea.
And how even the most forensically aware of killers couldn't beat the experts and hide their crimes.
The key thing about having a DNA profile is you've got probably the sharpest tool in the box.
I was so elated beforehand. We didn't have the evidence, and all of a sudden, we'd cracked it.
In this episode, in an ordinary town, the most extraordinary of murders.
Stabbed her 9 times in the back and twice in the neck. If she'd have known that she was going to lose her life, she'd have fought.
A woman killed in her own home, and a family torn apart.
And then my husband spoke to the detective who said the word deceased, and I knew Mum had gone.
And a search for a killer that took years and revealed a history of attacks.
I suppose I could have been his next victim.
This is Forensics, Catching the Killer.
In 1994, I lived in Regent Street in Wakefield. This felt like a very safe area to live. I mean, I would walk down the street at night on my own. I would walk down to the pub. I would walk home from the pub by myself. Most people knew each other, so you could guarantee walking home that you would see somebody that you knew, or somebody would help you walk you to your door, or, you know, it was a very safe neighbourhood to live in. It was the kind of place that you would leave your doors unlocked.
It's the 15th of March, 1994. 24-year-old Melanie Jane had been living in the Bellevue area, around a mile southeast of the city and close to the main cemetery. She was off work, recuperating from an operation, when a man knocked at the door, asking for directions.
The man was about 5'9", 5'10", balding on top, very short hair around the sides, dark eyes, really dark eyes, I'll never forget that. He had really dark piercing eyes, and he was wearing a bomber jacket that was zipped right up, jeans and trainers. I got a bad feeling about him as soon as I opened the door. It was his eyes. His eyes were really, really dark.
He had a piece of paper in his hands and claimed to be looking for an address further down the street.
While I was talking to him, I kind of looked down and his feet were like shuffling a bit close to the threshold. So again, this alarm bell was ringing even louder now. And as he was talking to me, he tipped up this piece of paper accidentally, and there was nothing written on it. It was a blank piece of paper. And that was when I knew. I thought, this guy's not right. And I literally slammed the door on him before he could get a foot over the threshold. I locked it.
It was a decision that potentially saved Melanie's life.
I've got goosebumps just thinking that I'm actually back here, that where things could have been so different. It makes me feel quite sick, to be honest. I suppose I could have been his next victim.
Detective Superintendent Bob Taylor was a senior officer on West Yorkshire Police's major investigation team in 1994.
I was at home in Leeds when I received a phone call from the control room to say there'd been a murder and I couldn't go. So they sent a traffic car over to pick me up and took me to Barn Lane in Wakefield. It's just out on the edge of the city centre.
By the time Bob arrived at the address in Barn Lane, a main road heading west out of the city, police had secured the crime scene and identified the victim.
They told me that the victim was Wendy Speaks. She was a 51-year-old lady, and she'd been found in the upstairs bedroom. Her boss had been ringing her because she didn't turn in for work, which was very unusual, and they couldn't get an answer. So they rang Wendy's daughter, Tracy.
I had a phone call from the lady that my mum worked for, and she said to me, Tracy, do you know if your mum's not well? Because it's not like her not to come into work. I just literally froze at my desk and my blood ran cold, and I just knew there was something wrong from that moment.
With the alarm raised, Wendy's concerned colleagues had gone to the house, where they had found her body upstairs. The police came at once.
So apparently the local police had to come to me rather than me being told over the phone what had happened. So I had to wait for that. But in the end, I just kept ringing the house, and then my husband spoke to the detective who said the word deceased. And I've never seen my husband cry, and he cried when I knew Mum had gone.
An initial assessment of the crime scene suggested that Wendy hadn't been home long when she was attacked on the 15th of March.
Everything indicated that Wendy had never got into her normal routine when she arrived home.
She'd always go in the back way into the conservatory, and then she'd lock the door, and she'd walk into the kitchen from the conservatory, and she'd take her shoes off there, take her coat off and her bag, because her shoes and everything were in the dining kitchen area. And then she'd put the kettle on and make herself a cup of tea. She'd take her jewellery off to get comfortable, so she'd put her watch on the windowsill, and she'd put her slippers on, and that would be her in for the night then.
So whatever had happened shortly after she came home. We calculated that she would probably have got home somewhere around about 5:20 to 6 in that previous evening.
In that short time frame, Wendy had been raped and brutally stabbed to death.
When I first got to the doorway of the room, I could see through the open door that Wendy, she was only a few feet away from where I was standing, and she had one arm across the bed, and she was slumped down, and there was blood staining on the cover. There was no signs of a fighting. There was an outline as well in blood of a knife on the bedspread. So there's no signs of struggle. So she was very compliant, and as if she'd have known that she was going to lose her life, she'd have fought.
While forensic investigators examined the crime scene, police under the command of Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Johnston conducted door-to-door inquiries looking for witnesses. And they found one. A worker at a printing firm opposite Wendy's home.
So this is the window that the employee was standing at when he saw Wendy open a front door to a man and have some sort of conversation with him. Wendy seemed quite relaxed. She had her arm folded. The witness noticed that she had her carpet slippers on. And then the person she was talking to went down the side of the house with Wendy stood at the front door, sort of with her arms folded, looking around the house to see where it was going, what it was doing. But then the employee had to leave this room for only a few minutes. And then when he came back, he saw the same person coming out of that door of Wendy's house. Came down a couple of steps onto the footpath outside the house, glanced to his right, and then set off walking initially to his left, up the hill towards Wakefield city centre. And after a few paces, he started jogging up the hill. And from that, the witness was able to give pretty good description of the man and also what he was wearing.
Police now had an idea of what Wendy's potential murderer looked like. But they would need forensic evidence from the scene and an entire dedicated team to help catch the killer. In March 1994, police in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, were investigating the murder of a 51-year-old woman in her own home. Wendy Speakes had been raped and then stabbed to death. It was a level of violent crime rarely seen in the town.
In Wakefield at that time, the crime was a lot of shoplifting, but serious crime wasn't very high, although it had a reputation of being a young person's drinking spot. So, assaults, a lot of sort of alcohol-related assaults and injuries were probably higher than the norm.
People's lives in the community definitely changed. Certainly I think in that area of Wakefield, people were worried about the possibility of it happening again. Was there a serial killer on the loose?
Of course, it created a lot of upset, particularly for women living on their own, husbands going to work and the wives being at home on their own, and all we could really do was to reassure them, increase uniform patrols in the areas and give them the advice: do not open your door to somebody you do not know.
The loves of Wendy's life were her two daughters. One of them, Tracy, at the time lived away from the community in Fear, in the south of England.
My mum was one of these ladies that was one in a million. She was loved and liked by everyone. She was very loving, and she was like my best friend, really, and my confidant, and I could talk to her about anything. So really, really close, and she loved her girls. She always wanted two daughters, and that's what she had, and she was forever grateful for that.
But Wendy's life was ruthlessly cut short, and her home had become a crime scene.
I set things in motion with the pathologist and the forensic science to come. I didn't go in the room because I didn't want to disturb anything.
And within that room, the killer had left some remarkable and very visible clues.
I saw in the room that on the bed there was a pair of stockings. Strangely enough, the foot of one was torn off and they were twisted together. They had loops in them, which seemed strange. And the stockings packet was still there on the bed. There was also a piece of pink candlewick rag that was laid on the bed, which didn't immediately fit in with what we were seeing. On the left, there was a set of drawers, and on those drawers there was a pair of ladies' black coat shoes.
This man had brought with him a murder kit, and a pair of mules were part of it. He took them and made Mum wear them. They asked us if they were Mum's shoes, and categorically 100% they were not her shoes. She would never have bought plastic, cheap, horrible mules that were not anything she would wear at all, and we've never seen them. They were not her shoes, and he brought them with him. A pair of Mum's black high-heel court shoes, Italian ones that she'd only bought recently, were missing from the shoe cupboard, so he took those with him as a murder trophy.
With only one possible eyewitness sighting of a man on the street who might have been the killer, forensic investigators knew they would have to rely on the crime scene itself. And their first clues came from bloodstains in Wendy's bedroom.
Could she have been injured anywhere else, or is there any other sort of movement of blood? Because of the nature of the attack, was there any chance that the offender might have cut himself? Because in something where you're doing this, there's a chance that your hand could slip down the handle and you could cut yourself. When we got back to the lab and started examining the clothing, because a lot of the items were heavily blood-stained, we found that we'd got some blood that wasn't Wendy's on some of her items of clothing, as well as, I think there was some on the bedding.
Police now had the killer's blood, but forensic teams continued their painstaking search to find more vital evidence that would help identify Wendy's attacker.
It's often referred to as the golden hour by detectives, but that's the period of time where the maximum evidence that can be extracted from a scene is going to be available. It's actually rarely an hour, sometimes it's weeks, can even be months. Nevertheless, it's called the golden hour because that's the period of time when you have to seize every opportunity you can get to get what evidence is going to be. And you don't know what that is until you've got it, and sometimes you don't know its value until far later into the investigation.
Paul Johnson said, right, you're in charge of the scene. I want you to rip that house apart. There's got to be a print. Take the banister rail off. In fact, they took the door off. I said, it don't matter what damage you do, we'll pay for it.
The only way that could be done properly will be to take the door handles off and subjecting them to specialist fingerprint examination. It's called supergluing at the time. But there could potentially have been other fingerprints on the UPVC doors as well. So we had to take the doors off. We had to cut the doors in half to get them to be able to fit into the machines to do the analysis. I remember we knew that the murderer had gone up the stairs. There's always a chance that the murderer would have left a fingerprint on the wallpaper going up the stairs. I remember taking strip by strip that wallpaper off and having each strip examined individually for fingerprints. And I remember also the feeling of guilt almost at doing that, of further defiling Wendy's memory and her home when someone had been into that home and done such a terrible thing, and there we are, making the destruction even worse somehow for the family. Feeling terribly guilty about doing that. But it had to be done.
It was hard initially walking into Mum's home because it was no longer her home. We'd spent all those times together sitting in the conservatory, and it was just a murder site, and people in forensics outfits walking around Mum's home, and it was just surreal. And you could see how, if it wasn't managed properly, that forensics could be lost by people walking, touching, or accidentally, rubbing their jacket against something and wiping off a fingerprint. So the way that they managed the crime scene, I'm forever grateful to them.
And the damage was worth it, as the forensic team's meticulous searching of Wendy's home did yield some clues.
So we found blood on the wall just inside that front door. We found blood and a partial fingerprint on the door handle. And of course, significantly, it's on the inside. So whoever put that there had to have been in the property. Unfortunately, the fingerprint was only a partial print.
That was the strongest clue. Unfortunately, they ran the match multiple times through the system. It was clear that whoever this thumbprint belonged to couldn't have had a criminal record.
With no fingerprint match likely, The forensic focus now turned to the blood found at the scene.
DNA profiling was in its infancy still in those days. We knew we had a DNA profile from some of the body fluid staining at the scene that could potentially provide some very compelling evidence in the future. However, in 1994, the DNA database had not been born. We didn't have the technology to do a DNA database, so we were very much working with our blood groups and doing a blood grouping screen, and I was very much involved in that. So we had hundreds of blood samples in to do this blood grouping screen, and we also had hundreds, if not thousands, of blood samples in to do a DNA screen. So we had a two-pronged attack, and the police were phenomenally busy having to go out and get samples, because back in 1994 it needed to be blood samples, which then needed there to be a police surgeon to take those samples. So it was a very, very big effort.
We took DNA samples from well over 5,000 men, voluntarily. Now, sort of hindsight bias would have it when people look at murder investigations that happened some time ago. It's very easy to think, well, this was sort of done and dusted straight away. They had the fingerprint on the front door. It was obvious that was the murderer's fingerprint. Well, it wasn't. It was obvious that the murderer would have a background of serious sexual offending. He didn't.
Alongside the time-consuming blood testing, detectives tried a more unusual method to narrow down their search for the killer.
As a proactive side to the investigation, I decided what we'd do is try and draw people with shoe fetish out. So we put a piece in the Sport newspaper with a telephone number which we'd set up, and we had a flat set up in Huddersfield for people who wanted to talk to this woman about shoe fetish. I wanted to meet her. So people would set up in the incident room. So people would ring this Huddersfield number, we'd come through to the incident room, and she'd talk to them. She'd ask them if she wanted to meet, and then when they turned up at a flat in Huddersfield, they'd be met by a couple of detectives who'd, take a mouth swab and a DNA. But yeah, so we had hundreds of people ringing up this number.
But frustratingly, the man who killed Wendy wasn't one of them. He remained at large, and although the case was never closed, it did go cold.
I think one of the things I found really hard with the investigation was that I expected that they'd find this man, because so much forensic evidence was at the scene. So it was really hard to accept that it was going to take time because he wasn't on the system. And I had to be patient, which isn't one of my fortes, and I just wanted answers.
Tracy's wait for answers would last 6 years, when police would finally make a breakthrough in the case. In 1994, police had been unable to find the killer of a 51-year-old woman from Wakefield, West Yorkshire, despite having recovered a partial fingerprint and a DNA profile from the murder scene. None of the evidence found had matched that of any offender already on record. Wendy Speakes had been raped and stabbed to death, and 6 years later, in the year 2000, her family was still hoping that one day detectives would find the man who had done this to their mum.
I think not knowing at the time it was going to take so long to find him was more of a challenge, really. It's very, very frustrating because you just want the answers and then you can try and grieve.
But the science of DNA profiling was evolving rapidly in the mid to late 1990s, and both West Yorkshire Police and forensic scientists didn't give up trying to find Wendy's killer.
As soon as new technology came on board, this case had the full treatment. So every time there was a new breakthrough in DNA technology, it was being upgraded. But it was all about whether or not the individual was going to be on the DNA database and whether or not that profile was then going to be searched.
Despite thousands of samples having been taken, there was still no match to either the partial fingerprint or the DNA profile found at the scene of Wendy's murder. But just as DNA science was advancing, fingerprint analysis was also becoming more accurate, with identification made possible using even just partial prints. And in March 2000, there was a match. The prints belonged to a man called Christopher Farrow. He was living with a partner and child in a Leeds suburb, less than 30 kilometres away from Wendy's home in Wakefield.
He was 33. He lived in the Cookridge area. He was just your average Mr. Joe Public. Worked as a painter and decorator, had a 9-to-5 job.
He'd been in a pub, and there was a policewoman in the pub, and he was bragging about drinking and driving, so she actually arranged for him to be arrested. So they took his fingerprints.
I remember vividly once we got the name of the person who had left that fingerprint, immediately looking at the background and being absolutely astonished that his profile didn't anywhere near fit that we expected it to, if he had been the murderer. No criminal convictions to speak of, no history of sexual offending, no connection, as far as we knew, to Wakefield. So why would his fingerprint have been there? And you immediately start thinking, well, is this a red herring? Could this be the murderer? Or could it be someone who's had legitimate access to Wendy's house? But clearly we were going to be speaking to this individual. The very strong likelihood was that he was going to be arrested, and we were going to be seeking his DNA.
Paul decided to proceed with that arrest, and what his officers discovered when they moved to make it would surprise them all.
I sent a team of our best detectives to his house to make the arrest. They commented straight away that he was a real cool individual, hardly showed any emotion or even reaction at all. It's very strange, isn't it, for someone who's been arrested, pulled out of the bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, arrested on suspicion of murder, to not even ask, why me? Why have you come into my house? But he didn't do any of that. He kept very, very quiet. So straight away you're getting a good feeling about this individual. But we still wanted that definitive proof. And then it was straight over to Wakefield, where he was interviewed.
In custody, Farrow continued to play it cool and deny any involvement in Wendy's murder.
No, I don't know Wendy Speaks, never been to Wakefield. All right, well, we'll take took a blood sample, one to go to forensic for blood grouping, and the other one was going down by motorcyclists to the Metropolitan Police Lab, because they were the only people at that time that could do a DNA in 24 hours. They tell him about the fingerprint, tell him about the fingerprint was found on the inside of the door handle. No, never been to Wakefield, don't know Wendy Speaks. Then we get a phone call from the forensics scientist to say the blood grouping from the blood sample we sent to them is the same as the semen. Now, blood grouping is you can get a rare blood group, which can be 6.2% of the population, so, it's not definitive. But it was the same blood grouping. And that's when he rolled over and confessed to killing Wendy.
when he admitted it, it was mixed emotions, to be honest with you. I remember watching him whilst he was being interviewed remotely and thinking, even then, could this really be Wendy Speak's murderer? Someone who has got no history as such. Not someone I was imagining would end up interviewing about Wendy's murder as a true suspect. But then when the DNA evidence was put to him, and the fingerprint evidence, he admitted it.
And still, detectives tried to get answers to some of the missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle.
You know, we want to find the whole truth when we interview suspects, but they don't necessarily will give you it all. You know, when it was put to him that, you know, you had a knife, you had this rag to use as a gag, you bought these stockings, you know, you had you had a bit of a murderous kit here. Oh, no. The rag was in my pocket because I used it at work. I used it to clean your hands. And the knife was just something that, you know, happened to be in there. It certainly wasn't one of Wendy's knives, so he brought the knife to the scene. He told us where he disposed of the items, but cost us 6 years on. But he was insistent that he didn't have a shoe fetish, and that he only killed Wendy as an afterthought. But now, 9 times, stabbed her 9 times in the back and twice in the neck. I don't think so. He never left that room. He never got up to leave. He knew that she'd have to die, and he'd come prepared for that.
Eventually he said some terrible things about, well, I was having a bad time, someone was going to get it, stuff like that. I don't believe a bit of that, to be honest with you. He's never given an explanation as to why he did what he did. He's never explained his fascination with shoes, shoe fetish.
But one answer which detectives could finally provide for Wendy's daughters was who had killed their mother 6 long years before.
I just remember Bob saying to me, we've got him, Trace, we've got him. And I just fell to the floor for a minute and cried that all of the 6 years of emotion and not knowing, and it all just came out. And he told me about the fingerprint, the name, and did I know anyone named, or did Mum know anyone named Christopher Farrow? And I said, absolutely not. Is there any reason why his fingerprint would be on your mum's front door? Absolutely not.
And Wendy's family weren't the only ones who were shocked by the news that police now finally had someone in custody for her murder. Word had reached the local community too.
The day I found out he'd been caught, my sister rang me on my mobile and she was like, have you seen the Yorkshire Evening Post? Well, across from my flat was a paper shop, so I dived in there, got the paper, I didn't look at it, I just bought it, went home, got into my flat, opened it, and his face was on the front page, and I was just like, wow, that's him. And then I was literally physically sick. I had to run to the kitchen sink and throw up, because I think that was the defining moment that told me how lucky I had been that day.
In the year 2000, after 6 years at large, the killer of Mother, Wendy Speakes, had been snared by a partial fingerprint he'd left at the crime scene. The man was from a Leeds suburb, not far from Wakefield, where his victim had lived.
When Christopher Farrow appeared before the Crown Court, we turned up on the morning only to be told that he would be entering a guilty plea to murder and several other offences. And yeah, the courtroom was absolutely packed at Leeds Crown Court.
Wendy's daughters attended every day of the hearings. The man who finally sat in front of them during that time, and who had admitted killing their mother, was not the kind of person they expected.
I was thinking and expecting all those 6 years it'd be this big, horrible murderer, and he wasn't. He was just this pathetic little, balding, skinny little man. And I was shocked that was the last person my mum saw. And I went to every hearing and he wouldn't look up. Cowards, that's what he is. He's a coward. He didn't want to look at me and my sister. He didn't want to look at my family. He had his head down. And that's what he wanted. He wants it all to go away. Minimise, minimise, minimise. And that's been his strategy all along.
Christopher Farrow was the most ordinary of ordinary people. I doubt any woman would fear sitting next to him on a bus, a train. There was nothing remarkable about him, which is, what we often say. It's what's behind the eyes that, you don't see.
And Wendy wasn't the only woman this seemingly ordinary man had his sights on. Another witness came forward, known in the trial as Woman A. She too had met Christopher Farrow on her doorstep just 1 hour before he killed Wendy. He had tried to persuade her to let him in, but sensing something was wrong and having seen him loitering on her street that morning, she slammed the door in his face. Given that he had raped and murdered Wendy not long after, Farrow was charged with attempted burglary and intent to rape Woman A, and later went on to admit his guilt.
How he chose Wendy is one of those questions that's very difficult to answer, because Wendy and Woman A, age difference, 25, 30 years apart. So what it was that attracted him to the person, apart from that if he'd followed them previously and he knew where they lived, and is then into his fantasy realms, buying the stockings with therefore Woman A to wear, or was that part of the fantasy murder that he was creating, where he clearly had put loops in the stockings and possibly at some stage might have had them round Wendy's wrists? I don't know. So that's really one that, only he could answer. But when we got to court, he denied anything in regards to Woman A. While we were swearing a jury in, because we needed to, we were going to go with it, he came back and said he'd admit to the approach to Woman A as well. So, in agreement with the Crown Prosecution Service, said, right, well, we'll accept those pleas. Now, of course, what we didn't do, because he denied it all the way up to court, we never had an opportunity when he had admitted it to sit him down and say, well, how did you choose that victim? How did you choose that?
He was keen to minimise what he'd done. I think it's all part of the fact that he's never really, throughout all of these years, never showed any remorse. And I think he tried to explain what he'd done away as he described himself as a rapist who murdered and not a murderer who raped.
And he got sentenced. His counsel tried to suggest in mitigation that he only killed her because she could identify him, and the judge really tore him a strip off, saying, that's not mitigation. No, it's not. You killed her, and you intended to kill her, whether you did it before or as an afterthought, you still killed her.
On the 14th of November 2000, Christopher Farrow was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years for the murder and rape of Wendy Speakes.
The fact that he's admitted guilt but never shown remorse ever, it just shows what kind of a psychopath he is. And that's the way he is. He feels no emotion, he feels no remorse, he doesn't have any. He saw Mum as an object, he sees women as an object. That's the way he is, that's his DNA.
Ultimately, it was forensic science that solved the murder of Wendy Speakes. And the dedication of the detectives who were working for me and for others, and also the dedication of the fingerprint officers. But we were all working on what was found at the scene of Wendy Speakes' house. You know, DNA technology undoubtedly was the key.
He didn't just single my door out, he knew where I lived. I personally think he was watching me, definitely. And I don't think I was the only one either.
But for Wendy's daughter, Tracy, the fight to keep Farrow in prison continues. Since 2018, he has been refused parole twice. That decision is reviewed every 2 years.
And that's why every parole hearing I fight for Mum and I fight to keep him in prison, and I'll continue to do so. Because that's where he belongs and that's the justice, and having that justice helps us get on with our lives knowing he's where he should be. I'll not even contemplate how I would live my life knowing he'd been released.
But it is the treasured memories of her mother that form a bond with the past, which will never be broken for Tracy.
One of the fondest memories of my mum was when she gave me away at my wedding. And she had this beautiful blue outfit on and pearls, and I remember her saying, "Oh, I wonder if everybody will think I look like the Queen Mum because I'm wearing my pearls." And she put together this fantastic speech. She stood up, she was so nervous she couldn't eat, and then she stood up to do her speech, and it was fabulous. She was fantastic.
These moments you will treasure because they mean the most. So let us raise our glasses while I propose a toast to the bride and groom.
Her walking me down the aisle and her doing that speech and being there at my side for my wedding is probably the fondest memory I've got of my mum.
Bức tranh này mình đã thu vào xong rồi, mọi người hãy để ý kiến của mọi người và đừng quên bấm follow kênh của mình nhé. Xin chào các bạn. Hôm nay mình sẽ hướng dẫn mọi người thu bức tranh này nha. Sử dụng tóc màu vàng này. màu xanh vậy nhé. Còn bạn này thì mình sẽ không đánh màu đỏ nha. Và đôi giày này nữa nhé. Bây giờ tôi con chó lên màu đen nha.